And welcome to the show, Our Islam and Community Issues. My name is Naeem Sharif. Today we have an honored guest, Brother Lama.
Rangdro.
Thank you very much. And this is part two of a program that we're doing about Buddhism, how it affects the individual. We're going to be talking about meditation. We're going to be talking about how Buddhism and African Americans, we're going to be talking about African spirituality, what Buddhism, what are the relationships. So we've got a lot to do. And so we talked about your background. Last time you were born in New York City.
Right.
And we talked about your mother and all the struggles that she went through, which so many black women have done. And that is a story, many stories in itself, and how you guys made it to LA. A lot of our people migrated, to New York, then from Texas and Louisiana. They came out west and so forth and so on.
Let me just bring out a point about my mother. She, when I was young, I thought the neighborhood was the world. And in order to go to the next town over, which was an all-white town, I had to put a shirt and a jacket on, and sometimes a tie, to go to the next city.
Interesting.
And because that was a safe thing to do. We now know about the Green Book, and sometimes you have to understand where you are, and as you move, you gotta change.
Right.
So when I got to be 16, she decided she wanted to let me know how big the world was. So she found a youth group that was going to Japan, and she put me on the plane, and I went with this youth group. So at 16 years old, I was walking the streets of Osaka and Kyoto and Tokyo and camping at the base of Mount Fuji. And that opened my eyes that America is not the world. There's something bigger out there. And so that was her contribution to me. And I think that, as we continue to try to recover from what has happened to us here in this country, that I'm encouraging everybody travel. And if you can, get out of the tourist bubble. I try to stay with people. When I go to Cambodia, I try to stay with people. When I go to Thailand, Chiang Mai, I try to stay local, even in a local hotel, not a big hotel, and I try to travel out with the people. In India, I stay in homes, right? Because you begin to see that it's possible to live completely different than what you think the world is, and still have dignity and a healthy concept of yourself, and you get a chance to have a human interaction with people who have only heard about people like you. They've never seen somebody like you, So I wanted to make that point, that how instrumental it is as a parent to encourage, the next generation to, now it's easier than ever to move beyond the American borders, just to get information for yourself. So she was very wise in that, and I took it from there.
That's good, yeah. Like a wise move she made for you.
She did.
Yeah.
And when you're 16, you think you know everything.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then when you get dumped into a place where you don't know anything. I mean, when I got off the plane, I was squinting my eyes because everything was in Japanese. And I thought if I just, if I kind of just closed my eyes and opened them enough, it would turn into English. And I found out that I don't have the power to do that. So I had to start learning, how to be in another culture that has antiquity, but is not grounded in, the American tradition. So it's very, very important, I think, just as human beings. It's not a Buddhist thing. It's a human thing.
It's a human thing. Yeah.
And also, we have a deep value in this world, African Americans. We've been through a lot. People respect us for what we've been through and how we've attained some semblance of place in this country. And we are ambassadors of our own community. So when we go abroad, and the people want to know, where are you from? Because when I travel, they say, "Oh, you must be Egyptian." No, I'm not.
Because I was going to ask you, what has been your response?
Well, some people think I'm
response?
Egyptian. When I go into Polynesia, they think I am Fijian or Samoan, because the Samoans look like me.
Yeah.
And so depending on the part of the world that I go to, people think, various things. I have to identify myself. And when you're abroad, they just look at you because they know you're going to speak.
Yes.
And the moment you open your mouth, they know where you're from, what class you are, what's happened to you. They know all these things. So then, once you make your first statement, then they, now, like when you're I was in southern Sweden in the city of Malmö, and I went to the McDonald's, okay? And I walked up to the counter, and I looked at the person, they were looking at me. They didn't say hello, they didn't say anything. You know what they're waiting for? For me to talk so they know what language to speak to me in. Because to be a McDonald's, front person, you have to speak German, French, Italian, English.
Wow.
Dutch, because those are all your customers.
Yeah.
And so, it's a different world there. And then once you open your mouth, then you become an ambassador. And we have a lot to share. So that's kind of what it's like. And you have to, where I go, sometimes I am not only the only African American they've ever seen. I'm the only African American Buddhist they have ever seen, and may ever see in their lifetime.
Well, on that note, let's talk about being a Buddhist, being a Black American. Yeah. What's been your history with that? And I know it's continuing to grow. What's been your experience? That's the word I'm looking for. What's been your experiences?
The most shocking thing is how many enemies I've been able to make. When I'm in Asia, I work with the untouchables.
Now, explain to the people, I know what the untouchables, but
untouchability means that there are people in your society who believe that you're so low of a human being that to touch you would soil them, and they have to go to the temple to be purified, cleaned. Wow. Not only that, but if your shadow falls on them, they consider, and if you're smoking a cigarette and the smoke wafts over and they smell it, they got to go get clean.
Now, I'm glad you explained that. I never heard that part.
Yeah, it's intense. And when you're walking down the street, you have to get off the sidewalk. This is mostly in the rural areas now. It's changed somewhat, but it's still, there's a lot of violence. The thing is, if you don't do these things, if you don't stay away from upper caste and you commit one of these acts, or talk back, or act out of your place, or don't reserve yourself to their demands, something can happen to you and your family.
So this kind of the parallel would be like Black folks in the South, in the United States, during Jim Crow and slavery and things of that nature.
Yeah, but casteism has been going on for, some people say, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years.
Right.
So these people have been existentially in slavery. And there are only so many jobs that you can do. And you're all the way back from, as far as your family can remember, your family's been doing that job. And they're all menial jobs: making bricks, cleaning sewers, cleaning toilets, dragging away dead carcasses of animals, so on and so forth, cremating bodies. So there's a whole culture of people. And there's somewhere around, some people say, 300 to 600 million people who live in some status of untouchability. And then there are people who are even lower than that, who are not even in the caste system. They're called the outcasts. And these people have never been in the system. Sometimes they call them tribals. And so they're even further down. And this all is relevant to who gets what we would call affirmative action when it comes to education and jobs and so on and so forth. There's definitely limitations, and it's rigorously overseen by the communities. You can't even marry outside your caste without, people have been killed by their families.
Wow.
So it's a very powerful thing. So when you go in and you're teaching peace and love and compassion and dignity, and, when I'm in India, I teach people what it means to be a human being. Because sometimes the dehumanization is so great that they have lost all concept of even being a human being. And so, there are people in the society who don't want that to change. Just like there are people in our society who don't want our community to be moving towards Buddhism. And so, as you do your work, and, I engage with suffering people throughout the world. That includes, I have engagement with groups in the Arctic, the indigenous Arctic people of Europe, who are white people, but they're like Native Americans, but they're Native Europeans and they're white. And they have been mistreated by the nation states. Their land has been stolen and they've been dislocated from their tradition and so on and so forth. So, when you're working with people who are at that level of various societies, the people who don't want it to change see you as a problem. So one of the things that, that I've been really surprised about, how the saying goes, more money, more problems, right?
Right.
Well, more work with the suffering communities, more problems.
More problems, yeah.
And so for Buddhism, for me, and my African-American heritage has been about how to endure that and continue my work. And people can be really riled. There was even in America, there was a point in my career where I had lawsuits going in 3 states because people were trying to attack me. And thank goodness for the attorneys, because some people are really bent on obstructing my work. So that's been one surprise.
Yeah.
Another surprise is that I have been able to endure it. I have been able to continue on and to be scholarly and to be a leader and to be an advocate and to be a friend to humanity. And all of that is a combination of the Buddhism, but also inseparable from the strength and the power of the black community that I grew up in. And I was one of those kids in the neighborhood where they wouldn't even let me get in trouble. Even the brothers would. They said, "Man, you got something going for you. Get out of here. Don't be around here. Get out." They would push me out. Don't do this. We're getting ready to go over here. You go over there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They loved me in that kind of way, and that's the power I'm talking about. And some of them didn't survive what they were doing, and I lost a lot of people, as we all have. But I'll never forget their resolve to make sure that I was one of the ones that made it out. So when you combine that power and that force, it turns into something if you live long enough to be able to apply it deeply. And it's not a local thing. It's not a community thing. It's a global thing. You can become a global citizen from what you learn in the worst part of our neighborhoods, because we are concerned about who we are as a people. And that's not a religious thing. There's, sometimes you look in the elders' eyes and they look at you and you just better get right. They don't even say anything. They just look at you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that strength and that power, we bring that to the table because, you know what's looking at you. It's not that person. They have a legacy. And so, as I said, when we have to apply this. Representative Cummings in the Cohen hearing, at his final statement, we are better than this. We are.
Yeah.
And so, that's why we have to share notes, be together like you and I are today, and to understand, Roots is not a movie. It's a place of moving from. And I have tested it on every continent on Earth. And I find that it has resonance and resilience, and it comes with a certain level of respect from people everywhere.
What I want to do is kind of do some connections here, and I hope I'm framing the question correctly or the statement. So the name of this topic is Buddhism for Black Americans. A conversation with you. So so is there for lack of a better term, is there like white Buddhism, black Buddhism? I think you know where I'm getting at. I would then, what's the difference, or what's the problem? What's the issue there? And then I want to tie that into some of the pictures where we see pictures of these things of Buddhism that look like us. We did some of those, and we have a lot of pictures that we can go through, but let's just to see if we can tie that in.
Yeah, so what's the difference? Is there a white Buddhism and a black Buddhism? No.
Okay.
Neither one. So why are we even talking about it in America? That's American problem.
Right.
I mean, why is there a white water fountain and a black water fountain?
Right.
Why is there a white jobs that white people do and there's no black people? I mean, why is that? That's not Buddhism.
Well, that's just like in what I think Malcolm X said, that the greatest separation would be at church at 11 o'clock. You had the white church and the black church.
And so Buddhism is not like that. Buddhism it comes from countries that are persons of color, and so it's never been European, never will be. The symbol of it has African features, always will be. And so the final, if that's the representation of the beginning, the current, it is also a representation of the future. So some people have issues with that when it comes to how it's applied in our country. So it's not so much that there is so-called a black Buddhism. There's only
right.
Buddhism.
Let me put it. I'm trying to put it in a better way. Have the Caucasians tried to put it where they're in America, that they're the total authority and nothing else is relevant? Okay,
so I don't want to, as a Buddhist, I cannot say, oh, those white people.
Right.
I will just say that there have been efforts in our country to try to capture the Buddhist idea culturally.
That's what I'm trying to get
at. There have been actually think tanks developed to figure out what words to use in Buddhism that would cause people to move in a certain kind of way. And so Vipassana, mindfulness, loving kindness, these words have been captured by a dominant culture. And so just look at the Buddhist magazines, and you'll see that there are a lot of dominant culture people. Go to your local yoga studios. Go to major mindfulness activities. You'll see who has dominated this. Okay. And that's not necessarily negative. There is white privilege in Buddhism, and white privilege is not a problem. It's just not, white privilege is not an everybody privilege, is it? And Buddhism is an everybody faith. So we have to make room for other cultures and other expressions of it in our country that most represent who we are. So this idea of, black Buddhism for African Americans, you could say Buddhism for Latinos, Buddhism for Asian Americans. They have these traditions, and they don't need to then somehow fit in. They come with centuries and sometimes millennia of history, right? So we just need to be able to assert that based on our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and the diversity of our culture in America. We need to be able to let those people assert themselves. So black Buddhism is as an assertion having nothing to do with the dominant culture and everything to do with people who have been disenfranchised from that information. So, for example, what does it mean? When a person dreams, this is kind of like a meditation thing. When a person dreams, you're at home, you're in the bed, you're asleep, your eyes are closed, complete darkness, the lights are out, and yet you dream, right? You see things. So the question from the Buddhist point of view is, where does the light come from? In your dreams. It's always been there. When did it start? How long will it go on? Does the mind have the ability to self-illuminate, to having nothing to do with the eyes? See, Buddhism is an approach to how to get to know your own mind. And you'd be surprised how many people in this lifetime, in our community, have never, ever heard about questioning where the light in their dreams come from.
Mm-hmm.
You see. And there are other aspects of the mind that are related to the mind's power to heal itself that are unknown. Only in the Buddhist world are they articulated in a certain kind of way. So the healing aspects of Buddhism are not racially focused. Mm-hmm. They are all human beings are African Americans, and African Americans are human beings. That's the criteria. Mm-hmm. There is no other criteria. So how do these deeper insight meditations, what is the role that they play in us undoing our experience on plantations here? Mm-hmm. That's not a dominant culture question, because many of them never had that. When they think about their history, they go to Europe. Mm-hmm. They don't go to slavery. So the Black Buddhism is about getting into the mind in a way that could be healing for this community. Okay. Yeah, that's what that is.
Okay. Very, very
I hope
good.
that explains it.
Yeah, that did. I want to try to get maybe two things into this segment. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just talked about meditation, mm-hmm. and if you wanted to do something on that, and then I wanted to show some of the pictures that we have, and you can talk about that. Whichever one you want to do first.
Well, I think, for this segment, I have introduced something. Mm-hmm. Just ask yourself, and I hope your viewers will ask themselves, have they ever realized that their mind is self-illuminating? Mm-hmm. And when do they think they were going to be told that? How much education have you had? How much, socialization in this country, and never been pointed to this nature of your mind? Mm-hmm. Because does it occur in the womb? Is a fetus? Do they have light in their mind? Mm-hmm. What is it, part of our humanity? If so, how old is it? How old is the light in your mind? Because where'd you get it from? The light of your parents' mind. And where do they get it from? The light of their parents' mind, and so on. How far back does that go? Mm-hmm. Because that's a continuum. If we focus on skin color and pigment, that's a very base idea.
Right.
The quality of the mind, what is its aspect in terms of clairvoyance? Mm-hmm. Clairaudience, the ability to hear things. Clairsentience, the ability to know what a bird is thinking, or a dog, or a horse. What is that? How does that relate to us? These are ancient human aspects that we have lost. Mm-hmm. How to relate to life itself, living things, trees, plants, rivers, mountains, the sky, stars. These are all our fellow components of this universe of which we are an expression of. Right? Mm-hmm. And so this light is part of that. We know how important light is. Who wants to live in darkness? No one. Mm-hmm. And so light is very important to us. And then we have it in our mind spontaneously.
Right.
So the contemplation, the meditation there is, what else do I not know about my mind? Mm-hmm.
Someone, I know a wise man once said, the cosmic mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
And so in our tradition we say that light is from beginningless, beginning endlessness. Mm-hmm. Right? And so too, therefore, if it's our thinking, then our thoughts must be in a continuum of thought, mm-hmm. experience that is also existential in that way. And so not only are we not defined by what has happened to us in this country, historically we are not defined by the nature of our mind as it exists based on the information that has been given to us in this experience either. Mm-hmm. We are far greater than that. Yeah? Okay.
Very, very good. So we got about, about 3 minutes.
Okay.
So I think maybe the next program that we do, we'll show a lot of those slides. Okay. And we'll talk a lot about the different slides. Okay. And for those people who are visual, mm-hmm. That'll be part 3 of this series, Buddhism for Black Americans. Mm-hmm. And we'll have a lot of pictures, and we'll have, really kind of go through those. Let's see. What are the connections, just briefly, with African spirituality in Buddhism?
Well, you know, I have a lot of, I've had a lot of contact, and I have some students who are Yoruba priests, because the deity pantheon of Tibetan Buddhism is very similar to the deity pattern of Yoruba beliefs. So Candomblé, Santeria, you know, they all have deities and related to natural elements, fire, water, and so on and so forth. So in our time, there is this pairing, this connection. But this is very, very ancient connection that we only experience it as recent because of our dislocation from our history. But maybe in the next segment, I'll be able to, you know, point out some pictures. For example, Tutankhamun's funerary chamber had in it a statue of him emanating from the lily of the Nile. Okay. And in Tibetan Buddhism, far, far away in the land of snows at elevations that you and I would barely be able to breathe in, the principal deity of that is Green Tara, and she is depicted in the 13th century with two flowers which are distinctly the lily of the Nile. Now, what is the lily of the Nile doing in Tibet?
Yeah,
and and also when you go back in history and you see the Buddhas of India, the further back you go, 14th century, 13th century, 12th century, 11th century, the blacker they get, until, for example, I was in Angkor in Cambodia, and there are statues that look like Maasai warriors, Buddhist statues.
Okay. Well, next show, folks, we will be having conversation, but we'll also have some visual things that will just make you say, Yes. So this has been part 2 of Buddhism for Black Americans. We're going to do part 3, and like I said, it'll be a lot of visual pictures there. So check us out. We thank you for tuning in. Check us out on cable TV and on our YouTube channel. And we thank you for watching. Peace and prayers. Thank you, sir.